Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Valora Washington, CEO of the CAYL Institute, that's Community Advocates for Young Children, and it is my pleasure today to welcome you to this webinar series today and every day on the first Thursday of the month at 4 o'clock Eastern Time. We bring these webinars to you to offer you important information and conversations about what's happening in the early childhood education field. And we're really excited right now because this is our 20th anniversary. For 20 years, we have been catalyzing change and inspiring the next generation, which gives me the chance to say thank you to the SHOT Foundation, who was our initial funder and who is funding this CAYL Catalyst webinar series. Very big thank you to them. All of our webinars and materials are offered free and without charge to the public. However, if you'd like to join the SHOT Foundation and make a tax-deductible donation to the CAYL Institute, just text the word CAYL to 53555. We welcome your donation in any amount. For the past year, we have been focusing a lot on how we can all move forward with our individual and collective change. And we've been using the symbolism of the Sankofa bird, an African traditional symbol, to talk about how we can move forward while we look back. And we also now are introducing the symbolism of the oak tree, which reminds us so much of the field of early childhood education in so many ways. The oak tree is an ancient as well as a modern symbol. It's a symbol for knowledge and wisdom. And we in early childhood education certainly bring knowledge and wisdom wherever that we're planted. We're 2 million strong, and the oak tree is also a symbol of power, strength, and stability. And we have power in our field as well. And just as the oak tree represents the 80th wedding anniversary, our long legacy of advocacy symbolizes our love, dedication, and commitment to this field. And if tiny acorns are the fruit of the oak tree, the small children we serve are also the heart of our beliefs, traditions, and standards. So we think that the oak tree truly symbolizes who we are in the early childhood education field. And in addition to thinking about looking back and who we are, we're also very interested in collecting information about what people in early childhood education are thinking about right now. And we're doing this in collaboration with Exchange Magazine. So you may have noticed that every month we're sending out questions asking you, what do you think about various issues? How do we look back and move forward? This month, we're focusing on questions around developmentally appropriate practice. What are you experiencing regarding developmentally appropriate practice? What strategies are you using? And how can we move forward with developmentally appropriate practice? So please write in the chat, tell us who you are, tell us what you're thinking about, and we and Exchange Magazine thank you a lot for that. In this series we've been offering in 2024, we have been honoring the past, and we have been hoping to inspire the future as we talk about brave leaders and the systems change that we all need. We've been asking you over the past few months to reflect on the historical challenges that have shaped early childhood education while we honor the trailblazers, the innovators, the brave leaders who have laid the groundwork for the positive change that we seek. And if you've missed any of these series, you can go back and listen to them without cost on our website at any time. You can go back and listen to The Courage It Takes to Fight for Equity, where we featured Sherry Killen-Stewart. We talked about the courage it takes to fight for families and featured Adrienne Pedrosa. Last month, we talked about the courage it takes to fight for family childcare, and innovator Jessica Sager told us her story. Next month, we're going to be talking about the courage that it takes to fight for systems change and to sustain that systems change, and we're going to have Maurice Sykes. But this month, we're listening to Barbara Cooper. Dr. Barbara Cooper, who's going to talk to us about the courage it takes to fight for family childcare. The courage it takes to fight for developmentally appropriate practice. Now, when it comes to developmentally appropriate practice, it has always taken a lot of courage to stand strong on the foundation of our knowledge base. The National Association for the Education of Young Children describes developmentally appropriate practice as methods that promote each child's optimal development and learning through strength-based and play-based approaches to joyful, engaged learning. Developmentally appropriate practice has to be linguistically, culturally, and ability appropriate for each and every child. Particularly in recent years, there have been educators who have offered critiques about the extent to which developmentally appropriate practice fosters diversity and cultural appropriateness. But nevertheless, developmentally appropriate practice theory remains foundational to our practice principles. And with this foundation, we are working with courage to hope that every child can have a developmentally appropriate practice delivered to them. And brave action is still needed to close the gap between our vision for developmentally appropriate practice for all children and the public realities that we often face. So today, we are going to continue our series on courage as we highlight the valor that some educators have taken to stand up for developmentally appropriate practice. And if you want to read about everyday educators like you and me, and the brave actions that people in our communities are taking to stand up for children, we offer a number of resources that we hope you will find very helpful. So let's take a deep dive now to thinking about our past and present and how we can move forward. But before we do, I want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded. Closed captioning is available. We hope you're writing your thoughts and questions and comments in the chat. And I want to invite you to join us in a live session with the speakers immediately following this webinar. There will be a link put in the chat. And if you'd like to have a conversation or speak with our speakers or directly ask them a question, please click that link at the end of this webinar and you will be able to do so. Also, after this webinar, you will receive in the email a packet of materials that will help you dive deeper into the whole question of developmentally appropriate practice. So today our agenda is that we are going to hear the story from Dr. Barbara Cooper. And then she will be followed by two next generation leaders, Dr. Pamela Truelove-Walker and Dr. LaTanya Barnes-Sibley. And as we listen to them, we're going to know a little bit more about what developmentally appropriate practice is, what developmentally appropriate practice is not, and what developmentally appropriate can be. And we will also realize that when we read things in some newspapers that describe developmentally appropriate practice as brainwashing children into woke concepts, we realize that we still have work to do. We still have to be in the business of building allies, and we have to put strong and positive messages out to the public. So detractors have always been present. They're still there, and therefore there is a need for courage. So today we are going to witness the courage of Dr. Barbara Cooper, now a Senior Vice President at Start Early. We're going to hear from Dr. Truelove-Walker, followed by Dr. Sibley. And so really, I am so excited to hear the stories of these three very brave women as they talk about their journey and how they are standing up for children, for developmentally appropriate practice, and for our profession. So I'm going to now ask Dr. Cooper to join me. Hello, and thank you so much for being part of our webinar series. We're delighted to hear from you today. Such a pleasure. Tell us about the courage it takes to stand up for developmentally appropriate practice.
Thank you so much. Always, Valora. It's always a pleasure to be with you and to have an opportunity to speak with you. I think the last time we were together, we were actually at the Early Childhood Conference in Alabama. So I'm honored to join you again. As we all know, developmentally appropriate practices has been around for a long time and has been the foundation for our work. But many do not know that the average child in America is not experiencing developmentally appropriate practices. It's still very aspirational for many, for our teachers, as well as for the children. Now, my fight for developmentally appropriate practices and my journey began long before my tenure at Start Early or my former position at the Secretary at the Department of Early Childhood. My story is actually one of resilience, and unfortunately, I learned at a very early age about the inequitable treatment of people because of their color, because of their language, challenges with disabilities, and so forth and so on. You see, my maternal grandmother, Lucille Ville, witnessed her family being burned in their home at a very young age. She and her sister were the only ones to escape. Now, they went on to be adopted by another family and they learned to live with the trauma. But my siblings and my family, we grew up knowing this ugly history about my grandmother's past, and it left many unanswered questions for me. And it made racism a very personal part of my existence. And although my family didn't talk a lot about the experience, it happened. Now, we were very fortunate that my grandmother lived through her early experience, and she went on to marry my grandfather at the age of 13. They actually produced over 800 offspring. I have over 100 first cousins. So my dad was the 12th of these 13 children. They were sharecroppers, they were farmers. My dad only completed the 8th grade, but they were part of that great migration to the north from Georgia, where they purchased a small home for their family, and they raised us all to start to embrace and understand what it meant for us to have a part of the American dream. My parents were very successful in giving me the foundation I needed for a better life. Now, I know that taking a stance against DEIB does not always feel like, or there are many that don't feel that we should acknowledge this ugly history. But what I'm sharing is that this occurred, and I was always taught that we must acknowledge this, or otherwise we were destined to repeat it, and we wanted to progress. So I can't return or I can't change this part of my history, as it does serve as a foundation for who I ended up growing up to be as a Black woman educator. And it is the reason why I chose to lead through an equity lens in all of my professional callings. And anyone who has worked with me know that we were always understanding and learning the importance of leading and doing our work through an equity lens. So I never denied any of this to get or to retain a job or a calling or a position. Developmentally appropriate practice just naturally aligns with my beliefs about how we treat human beings, our youngest citizens, our children, and how we support them so that they ultimately become adults capable of leading our country and teaching the next generation. As many of you probably know, this time last year, I was experiencing a truly pivotal moment in my life and my career in early childhood education. To kind of put it in perspectives and to put you into my shoes, imagine being honored for your dedication to early childhood education, getting an award for courageous leadership, commemorating your 33rd wedding anniversary all on the same day. Now go on and add the unexpected twist of being let go from your position as Secretary for Early Childhood Education. This was my reality on April 21st, 2023, and of course, the irony was palpable. I didn't think much of it when the Chief of Staff asked to meet with me before going into the office that morning. We began our conversation with the normal pleasantries, and when she shared we're going in a different direction, I was quite certain I had misunderstood, and I asked a different direction why. She repeated herself and shared, I was being asked to resign as my views did not align with the administration's views about developmentally appropriate practices in the pre-K classroom. And of course, I left the Capitol in a daze because, again, I still didn't quite know what that meant, because we'd always had developmentally appropriate practices as the foundation for our work. Staff were just as shocked as I when I returned to the office. I happened to also have a NACCE board meeting that weekend in Washington, D.C., and I, of course, contemplated canceling going on the trip. I'm so glad, however, that I didn't, because this is where the momentum began. And despite the setback a fire was lit for me to begin making sense out of this mess I found myself in. I saw firsthand the power and commitment of the early childhood community as I began receiving an outpouring of support and offers to continue this great work. This renewed my fight to continue fighting for developmentally appropriate practices and for our youngest children. You see, in my role as secretary, I had the opportunity of traveling the country and traveling across our state to all 67 counties where we were providing hope through high quality education for children. I was leading my team of educators through creating these equitable opportunities for our young children so that we could help children determine their destiny and determine and experience what could be their American dream. I spoke to anyone who would listen about the importance of investing in our youngest citizens, children birth through age 5. And annually, yes, I must admit, I would make that trek to the State House to talk with our politicians, our lawmakers, legislators, and anyone else who would listen about prioritizing and appropriating funds for early childhood education. And as a result, pre-K received bipartisan support for over 17 years, and everyone was thrilled to share our success in Alabama for something other than football. Yes, our state was ranked #1 by the National Institute for Early Education Research for 17 consecutive years for meeting all benchmarks for high quality in our pre-K classrooms. Further, children who participated in our program were more likely to outperform their peers in grade 3 in both reading and math. And these results actually persisted without fade out based on a study that we conducted. Children who participated in the program met widely held expectations in all domains of learning. They were in school each day, had good attendance, they had good executive functioning skills, and received less disciplinary referrals. They were less likely to need special education, and very few were retained in a grade. Now, this data was true for the children we were serving, but it was also very true for me and spoke to my own experiences with early childhood education. And many of these stories that I would share did not come from a college textbook. These stories were very personal for me. I attended one of the earliest Head Start programs on the south side of Chicago in 1972. And the lessons I learned in Ms. Ball's classroom formed the foundation for my life's journey in education. As a 4-year-old, I was one of those who would wake up at the crack of dawn. I would stand very impatiently at the door with a book bag that was way too heavy for a 4-year-old, rushing my mom to help me get to school on time. So I've always been very passionate about learning. But what I remember most was when I arrived at that Head Start classroom, I'd run to the door and Miss Ball would meet every child every single day with a hug, regardless if we were wet, if we had colds, if we had fallen in the snow. She was right there and she would tell us how smart we were. She'd tell us to choose a book because readers are leaders. And she would spend time talking to our parents, helping to understand what was going on in our home life so that she could meet each child's unique abilities. Some mornings she'd even allow me to comfort a cousin next door who had a challenge separating some days from my mom or aunt. I thrived in this classroom because she used developmentally appropriate practices as a foundation to create the kind of loving and caring relationships with her students. She created an environment that was built on our cultural, linguistic, and any special needs that we had were addressed. As a result of what she poured into me, I walked into kindergarten ready to learn, and not only in kindergarten, but beyond in other grades as well. This is what we want for all children. We must all continue the good fight because we know that the investments in early childhood education certainly provides a greater return on investment than the investments our country makes sometimes in building prisons based on third-grade reading proficiency scores. You see, we were doing the right work, and we were getting the funding we needed to build an even stronger legacy for the 4-year-olds in Alabama. And this knowledge gave me the energy to do this work every single day. You see, before being appointed to serve as the secretary at the Department of Early Childhood, I spent 25 years in K-12 settings. And I knew all too well that we spent millions of dollars annually on remediation for children who entered school with significant achievement gaps, and for many, the gaps persisted. If we spent these same dollars on children birth through age 5 before they even entered kindergarten, we wouldn't have the same challenges. Under my leadership, we were always very clear about the focus of DAP. We encourage teachers to be aware of inequities, implicit bias, the diverse backgrounds that children were coming into the classrooms with. We drew directly from the book's content, citing passages in our trainings for teachers. We had discussions about structural racism, white privilege, and all of those things that helped us to affirm the children that we were serving. In addition to our intentional efforts and clear focus regarding DAP, we took multi-pronged approaches to prioritize and implement DAP throughout our state. We adopted the DAP statement. We invited legislators into the classrooms, community members to see DAP in action. So as I think about all of these things, I keep having people continue to ask, how can we remain hopeful and enable a brighter future for our professionals, families, and children? My response to this question is there is no living, there's no better hope tomorrow without having hope. There's no better tomorrow for us if we don't have this hope. Fortunately, I have the opportunity of allowing hope to actually meet action by continuing this work as the Senior Vice President at Start Early. I have an opportunity to actually lead a team that's providing professional learning across the country in order to be able to continue to support young children and walking into those classrooms ready. I cannot end this conversation without thanking our courageous teachers, thanking our educators for showing up every single day for children and families and giving them what they need in order for them to be successful. Focusing on all children means that we are meeting them where they are. We are focused on eliminating opportunity gaps so that all children can thrive and learn. As I prepare to close, I just want to leave you with a thought. In the face of adversity, I encourage you to dig deep and find the courage to always do the right thing. If someone tells you they're moving in a different direction, remember to move forward with grace. It does not mean the work is ending. In fact, it means the journey is continuing. It means you probably will get to do this work on an even larger playing field. I hope that this discussion is enlightening for you. I hope that you recognize that we are a team, we are a community. We're all struggling with similar issues at macro levels across the field. Not only should we lean on each other, but we should learn from each other. We should learn different ways to overcome these challenges and remain hopeful about the future. As I pass this off, I just want to thank Dr. Pamela Truelove-Walker and Dr. Latanya Sibley for the work that they did as part of our dream team, for the work that they did for our children in Alabama, and for the work that they are continuing to make sure that the mission we have for all children to receive an equitable early learning opportunity is fulfilled in ways that we have an opportunity to impact. At this time, I'd like to pass it off to my friend, my colleague, Dr. Pamela Truelove-Walker.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cooper, for those words. They are very encouraging indeed. As has been stated, developmentally appropriate practice is not new, and attempts to undermine the integrity and foundation on which DAP has been built is also not new. Yet, I liken DAP to words I have coined from the esteemed author Maya Angelou. Still, it rises. People can write it down in history with bitter, twisted lies, trod DAP in the dirt, but still, like dust, it rises. And why is that? What makes this rising continue to occur over and over again? I tend to believe it is because of its foundational truth. It is the infallible pedagogy that has been the pillars of best practices for decades. Treat children and families with respect. Honor their heritage, beliefs, and cultural systems. Families do not walk into early learning environments, classrooms, to be fixed. They enter those doorways and edifices with the anticipation of growth for their children and at times even for themselves, whatever that looks like and whatever that should happen to mean to them. And then as early childhood educators, our job is to meet them where they are, welcome them into that environment, open to learning and growing together. Fundamentally, that's why DAP continues to rise despite oppressive forces. And let's be clear, in Alabama, incorporating the principles of DAP into practice was not accidental. It was a well-planned, well-developed system in place, ensuring educators knew developmentally appropriate practice and would be responsive to its tenets. In my previous role with the Department of Early Childhood Education, DAP was a mainstay for new teacher development. All teachers who were entered into those state-funded classrooms received an overview of developmentally appropriate practice and guidelines for effective teaching as part of their professional learning. Long before Dr. Cooper stepped into leadership role as Secretary of the Department of Early Childhood, the Green Book, which was our colloquial reference to NACCE's third edition of DAP in early childhood programs, that Green Book, that resource was king. Every classroom was required to have the Green Book, and coaches used information from its pages to guide conversations with developing teachers and identify any gaps between teachers' beliefs and their instructional practices. And I'm sure there are many curiosities about what happens in places and spaces where the DAP book has been abolished, literally retrieved from state-funded pre-K classrooms and tossed aside. Diversity, equity, and inclusion language stripped from the early learning standards, and other NACCE resources banned from usage. The question comes, now what? Well, I will say I am a unicorn and rainbows kind of thinker. So I believe the now what is that good teachers will continue to do what good teachers do, and effective administrators will continue to be effective administrators because they know what works and they know what's good for children and families. Decades of research continues to outline both short and long-term positive impacts for children who are in high-quality early learning environments supported by best practice. Students more likely to be ready for kindergarten across all school readiness domains, closes the achievement gap in reading and math with even greater significance for minority students and students in poverty, increases likelihood of graduation from high school, attending college, earning higher wages, and so on and so this. We know this. The longitudinal data exists that correlates this. Yet repeatedly, we found ourselves defending developmentally appropriate practices and trying to convince policy makers of its value. I mean, we have record numbers of children in the US who are not proficient readers by the end of third grade, but we don't see K-12 systems having to defend whether third grade works or has value. Instead, more funding is channeled towards ensuring its efficacy, and the same should be true for DAP. More energies, more funding, more supports to ensure every child and every family is nurtured in the most sensitive of ways with an eye towards self-actualization and reaching one's fullest potential. So I return to my introductory thought, thinking about dust. Now we can walk through our homes day after day, and if we don't touch the bookshelf, touch the artwork hanging on the wall, dust settles there and its presence quietly multiplies over time until finally one day, either intentionally or for many of us, maybe accidentally, our finger wipes across the surface and lo and behold, there's the dust. So we grab a dust cloth and maybe some dust cleaner and begin the wipe down to the shiny and new. But watch what happens. Come back a week later and there it is again, dust. Because no matter how hard we try and how often we clean, dust particles are never extinguished. They will always make their presence known. The classroom teacher who continues hanging all about me family posters in her classroom makes the presence of DAP known. The teacher who sits in the learning center with a child and reads to them a story that depicts a wide range of children with different skills and abilities makes the presence of DAP known. The administrator who for the first time is greeted by two dads who want to tour the child care facility, two dads who ultimately choose to enroll their son, and while filling out the registration form, simply crosses through the word mother and replaces it with the second father. The administrator who for the first time becomes aware of the limited perspective of that registration form. These two dads were one of many compositions of families, blended families, grandparents raising grandchildren, foster families, many compositions, but one commonality. They are all guardians, caretakers, protectors of the well-being of their little ones. They are all parents participating in raising and nurturing children. So the administrator who without conversation, without fanfare, revises the form and puts guardian parent number 1, guardian parent number 2. And 1 year later, those two dads, as they're moving from that city to another state, meet with that administrator to tell her how much that one change, a simple change, in fact, truly meant everything to them because it represented inclusion and they felt it. I was that preschool administrator, and if change actually changed me. So even despite the pressures from outside noises, effective administrators will continue to be responsive to the individualized needs of children and families and make the presence of DAP known. These are but tiny examples of how best practices continue to live and breathe and continue to have meaning. But I conclude with this, reminded again of the words of poet Maya Angelou. People may shoot it with their words, cut it with their eyes, kill it with hatefulness, but still like air, DAP will rise. And with that, I hand off to Dr. Sibley.
Thank you, Dr. Truelove-Walker. And good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to just pause, really, just take a pause and center our attention around what matters most, which is the foundation of educating the whole child, developmentally appropriate practices in early childhood education. Firstly, I would like to extend a huge thank you to Dr. Barbara Cooper. You are a teacher hero. And Dr. Pamela Truelove-Walker, who is an education warrior. Thank you for sharing your expertise and your insights. I've been scribbling down notes vigorously, trying to ensure I can research some of your nuggets of wisdom and share some of those best practices and implement them in my daily practice. So thank you. And while we're talking about those practices, let's take a moment and just really delve and just dig into these practices. I want you to take a moment and picture this. Close your eyes. I am a national board certified teacher, and we do a lot of reflecting. So I want you to reflect with me. So I want you to take a moment and we're going to think and we're going to reflect and we're going to pause. So picture this. You're in a classroom or you're at home with a lively group of curious little minds just buzzing around you. You have a group of just kids and students and children, everywhere. How do you create an environment that is developmentally appropriate? And how do you implement these developmentally appropriate practices and these strategies? You see them all around you? Okay, I'm going to tell you, and during the next few minutes, I'll share a few developmentally appropriate strategies that are research-based, sprinkled with some examples that I've seen work like magic. So let's talk about some of these things we can do. The first strategy is follow the child's lead. Now you're still in the classroom. Don't leave out that classroom with those students. Yeah, those children are still there running around. You're in that classroom. Now you're a great educator, so you already have your lesson planned. Okay, we already know you walked in with it. So imagine that you're in this classroom with these students, and now you're over there playing with a group of toddlers. These toddlers, they are suddenly obsessed with building blocks, with building maybe towers out of blocks. What do you do? You have a lesson already planned. In the chat, I want to know, what do you do? You have something planned, you're ready to go, but they look like they are a tad bit busy over there. They are busy over there with those blocks. What do you do as an educator? You let them play with the block. Absolutely. You start a conversation with them. You put your plans aside and you extend that block time. Absolutely. That's it. So instead of redirecting them to another activity, how about just roll with it? Just roll with it. Encourage their exploration by adding new materials, maybe like clipboards or different tubes or plastic cups. I don't know, just different things you'll do. Absolutely. You'll be amazed at the creativity that unfolds when you let the children take the lead. So even if you have a lesson, how can you incorporate those blocks into the lesson? You're still getting out of them what you want, just a different way. That's one thing you can do. Another thing is embrace messy play. Yes, you heard me right. Yes, embrace that messy play. Now, I am still working on that myself. Yes, I know I'm a stickler, and so I just clean it up really quick. I know I need to just judge yourself. Okay, so messy play. So whether it's finger painting or digging in the sand pit or squishing maybe some Play-Doh between your fingers, messy play isn't just for fun. It's always so critical for sensory development. So lay down those tarps and put on those aprons and let the messy adventures begin. Number 3, create a cozy reading corner. So do you already have a reading corner? There is something truly magical about snuggling up with a good book, isn't it? So designate a cozy corner for reading. You can do it at your home. You can also do it at schools. Get some cushy cushions maybe, or some soft rugs, and put a lot of books on the shelves and encourage them to read. Encourage them to explore different genres. Maybe it's fairy tales or nonfiction. Just who knows? You might just inspire a lifelong learner who loves reading and loves writing. You might get an author. You just never know. So go ahead and create that cozy corner. Another thing is incorporating dramatic play. So transform your space into a world of endless possibilities with dramatic play. So you can set up a pretend kitchen or create a dress-up corner with costumes and props. Just watch children as they slip into those different roles. They'll become a brave firefighter, or they might be daring explorers. Unleash their creativity. Allow them to play. Give them some props. You don't have to do much with developmentally appropriate practices, as you see. You're just letting the students take the lead, and we're leading them on their journey. We're just facilitators in this journey. Number 5, we're going to encourage outdoor adventures. There is no denying the magic that the great outdoors bring. Who's with me on that? I love being outside. Sign me up. Yes. So take learning beyond the classroom walls for them. They want to go outside and explore nature. They can go out there, help them out. So whether it's planting seeds in a garden or going on a bug hunt, okay, never mind. I'll go on the bug hunt. Maybe no bug hunts. Got it. Allow them to lay in the grass then maybe and just gaze up at some clouds and go inside, and maybe you're going to do some finger painting and talk about different clouds, cumulus clouds and strategies. Let the adventure, let the outdoors. Sometimes we're thinking, oh my goodness, I have to do all these things, and you really don't. Sometimes you can just take a moment and step back and pause, and you will realize the world of learning is right there in front of you. So those are just 5 different strategies that are easy, efficient, and most importantly, fun. Yeah, they're fun, but you're still hitting all those strategies, and you're still doing what's developmentally appropriate in the classroom, as well as hitting all those standards. So remember, it's not about just what you teach, it's how you teach it. Developmentally appropriate practices are joy practices. So you'll know if you're doing it right if you hear children laughing, laughing while they're learning. You're hearing that, you're doing it right. By embracing developmentally appropriate practices, we create environments where children can thrive, where they can explore and discover the joy of learning. Let's keep this conversation going with our group discussion about developmentally appropriate practices.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited by what you're saying. And it's so obvious that you're an accomplished teacher. Congratulations on being board certified and being an accomplished teacher. And I think developmentally appropriate practice, professional development is helping every teacher be that accomplished teacher as we move forward. Since you, Pamela, brought up Dr. Angelo, I thought I would start our conversation by saying some of her very wise words on courage. You know, Maya Angelou said that courage is the most important of all virtues, because without courage, you cannot practice any other virtue. I love that quote for her. I've used it in one of my books because I think the whole idea of courage, it really speaks to the other virtues that we heard so much in Dr. Cooper's talk. Maya Angelou then went on to say that having courage does not mean that we are unafraid. Having courage and showing courage means that we face our fears. This is a really important wisdom that she shared. So thank you so much for bringing her in the room. What I hear from all of you today is about intentionality. Being very intentional as the teacher, as we've heard, being very intentional as the administrator, being very intentional as the broader leader, and bringing that intentionality. When you bring that intentionality, it also brings attention, sometimes unwanted attention, right? Because you are being not random, you are being very intentional. I can remember being in Alabama with all of you and seeing the thousands of teachers so excited and so embracing, and also seeing some of your state political leaders congratulating all of you and commenting on all of you and what an excellent job you were doing, meeting those near standards and all of that. Since that time, the tide turned virtually overnight. But you brought that intentionality. What more can you say about being intentional? Because that's what I saw you all doing.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I would say our team, that's how we approached the work. We didn't haphazardly approach it. We were very thoughtful about what we were going to provide for our teachers. I think so many of us had been teachers before and maybe had not always had administrators or leaders who thought about what they needed for those experiences as they went into those classrooms. And so, as Dr. Truelove-Walker kind of outlined, teachers knew what they were signing up for when they came into our early childhood classrooms. They didn't walk in there not knowing that DAP was going to be the foundation for the work, that DAP was going to be what guided the work. And so once they knew that, then we were able to prepare and create very intentional professional learning plans for them. And we held everyone accountable for that. And the standard was for our teachers, it was for our leaders, it was for anyone who was engaged with our work, even home visiting. We expected everyone to do the work through an equity lens and through an understanding of what it meant to be developmentally appropriate with young children.
We hear people now talking about an equity lens is really a woke agenda. And we hear people talking about an equity lens is really brainwashing children. How do you respond to that, if you respond at all?
I think part of it is the audience. What is driving someone to have these ideologies? And sometimes, sometimes there are political motivations that is the driving force, and sometimes it is just basically purely a lack of knowledge. Recently, my father made a statement, and he said, it's okay to be dumb for a little while. And then you have to come to the realization of what really needs to happen get some learning, and keep moving forward. And I told him, I said, those are very wise words, because sometimes there are many individuals who I think their lack of knowledge, they enjoy the fact that they don't have that additional knowledge, because with additional knowledge means that you have to do something with it, right? So if I know more and I know better, then there is the push for you to strive to do better, or to advocate, or to do something with this knowledge that you have. So for individuals with individual conversations, if it's a teacher, I approach that with curiosity. Tell me about that. What information do you have that is supporting that ideology? If it is a policymaker, tell me about that. What is leading you to believe that this is something that shouldn't be funded, or that there should be funding that should be applied in a different direction? But I think when you're having conversations like that, you still have to be curious, and you have to find out the reason why those kind of ideologies exist, and then be able to respond accordingly. Because at the end of the day, it's not really about defending one thing over the other, but about helping other people to come into a better understanding of what we mean when we talk about developmentally appropriate practice, what it means when we talk about equity, and really what it means when we use the terminology woke, because typically it's applied inappropriately.
I would like to add to that. I'm thinking about my pedagogy and going through post-secondary education. All of our classes really focused on educating the whole child. I don't care what class you're in. If you're in classroom management, if you were in a numeracy-based class, whatever it was, it focuses on educating the whole child. So recognizing that each child is unique and bring their own set of experiences, backgrounds, and abilities to the tables, DAP strategies deliberately embrace and celebrate diversity in all its forms. So from incorporating culturally responsive materials and experiences to ensuring equitable access to learning opportunities for all students, regardless of their backgrounds. Diversity is included, it's in the curriculum. So developmentally appropriate practices foster an inclusive environment where all children feel respected, valued, and empowered to succeed. So by encouraging diversity, these developmentally appropriate practices or strategies, they not only enrich the learning environment, but they also promote empathy and understanding in a sense of all students belonging. So it's really important to know that teachers have been ingrained to educate the whole child. That's what we do. We look at who the child is. And I just wanted to add that's very important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was really mentioned. I'm going to use a term to describe what I think you were talking about, Pamela, and that is the quiet resistance. When you go into these settings, no matter what the policy is, and you see teachers and administrators behaving in such certain way, they are in fact resisting, right? They are in fact resisting. And there's so many examples of this quiet resistance. I mean, as you well know now, there are states where you cannot even say the word equity. And there are states, many things have happened at a policy level that have really made it difficult in some places to really speak openly. But you do see this resistance. You do see teachers and administrators behaving in ways that are aligned with these values, these norms, these practices, right? It is a kind of resistance.
For sure. So, that's in my reference to the individuals who are the dust, right? So we're going to be here. I mean, you can talk about it. You can say it's removed. But when I have something that I really believe in, it's going to stick around, and the presence will be made known in some form or fashion. So just like, we can dust off the shelves and say the dust is gone, it's still there. There are particles that still remain. So individuals who inherently believe in developmentally appropriate practice, and then knowing that if we are implementing best practices in these classrooms, the outcomes that are possible for children, the way that you then engage families and interact with families, and you make them feel about being a part of this environment, those things are larger, much larger than the policy that comes across that says we will not utilize, any DEI language within our courses, because we can show sometimes even better than we can talk about it. So yes, I'm still going to hang up my All About Me posters and then show all the different forms of families that exist. We're still going to have parents come in and talk about their culture. So we're going to have this awareness of who these children are and who these families are and what they bring to the table. And as an administrator, I'm going to be open to listening and responding to my families when they have concerns or if they have questions. And I'm going to do that in a way in which I'm going to be respectful. So that quiet resistance is quiet until such time the dust needs to be settled. And then when you disturb it, then it's really disturbed and it comes up in this big poof. And then all of a sudden you have a group that can really advocate and kind of hang around each other and say, we are in this together doing what we know is right for children and families.
So many visual images popped in my mind as you were speaking. Let's talk about our present situation, and also let's make sure in our last minutes we talk about the path forward. Somebody in the audience here is asking about how professional development today, because teacher turnover is very high. As we know, we're having challenges in recruiting and maintaining our workforce. How is this impacting developmentally appropriate practice? I know, Dr. Cooper, you said in the beginning, most children aren't receiving developmentally appropriate practice. And so how is the current situation, you feel, impacting our capacity to offer this to every child?
Yes. Well, we know that children are being impacted. We know that our educators are being impacted. And it's incumbent upon us, though, to ensure that it continues to remain a priority. At Start Early, we are very cognizant of this. We're also very cognizant of there are some things that we have to do differently in terms of the way we deliver the professional learning. We know that traditional ways of delivering professional learning with a lot of sit and get has to be revised. So we're coming up with creative solutions and ways that we can reach all of our educators, but recognizing that we cannot defer or deter from what our beliefs are. And we still have to make sure that what we are providing for educators is still very much grounded in developmentally appropriate practices and provide this information in a way that it is accessible and everyone realizes that, part of our call to action is that the work continues. And the work continues and it has to be done in ways that responds to our current landscape. We recognize we have a lot of teacher turnover and we have, the issues of infrastructure around wages. So all of these are things that we still have to really navigate through intentionality in the way that we approach the workforce.
Mm-hmm. Some of us who are more senior have seen these cycles before, these cycles of push back and push forward and push back and push forward. And we've seen these cycles come and go. We're in an era right now, without question. We're in a politically charged era in our nation. A lot of that is focused on education, what does and does not happen in educational environments. What is our path forward in this moment? What advice, encouragement, and you've already inspired everyone with your words today, but what are some things that people could be mindful of? We will have people listening to this webinar who are in challenging situations as it relates to issues of equity and developmentally appropriate practice. What words can you offer for them as a path forward? Each of you, please.
I would say don't stop, because oftentimes if a single step, an inch forward, don't stop trying to make progress. And that progress doesn't have to be big, because sometimes, there are individuals who have larger platforms, but I think in terms of each one can reach one. So as a classroom teacher, I may not be able to impact all the teachers down the hallway, but I can impact my classroom and I can impact the families and I can advocate for the children who are actually in my classroom. We can do a pod. Each teacher can reach another teacher. An administrator reaches an administrator until we then can give voice to the collective. So there's the synergistic impact that can happen when each one just reaches one. So I just say, don't stop. This is what you believe in. You advocate for it. You continue those conversations. And sometimes there are hard conversations. We're not always saying that this is easy. The work is not necessarily easy, but I will say the work is gratifying when you can see at the end result that there's light at the end of the tunnel. And at the end of that tunnel is going to be the face and the vision of a little child. My 7-year-old granddaughter, Ashton, her face is at the end. She's the light at the end of the tunnel. And so as long as I can envision that, my each one can reach one continues to build and build momentum.
Mhm. If you want to be in a conversation with these three dynamic women, please click the chat at the end of this webinar and you will have an opportunity to interact with them personally. Our time is running out, but I would like to ask the two of you if you have any final comments about the way forward and how we can move this agenda.
Yes,
work
I'll
forward.
say it really, really quick. I invite each of you on a journey of transformative action. So let's not allow our wealth of knowledge to stay confined on these screens. Let's make sure we're out in the community. So whether it's advocating for more resources or support for DAP implementation or fostering meaningful collaboration, just please, let's keep the momentum going.
And I would just say ditto to what these wonderful ladies just shared, but certainly just recognizing that we all have a voice and there is a call to action for us all to use our voice, use our influence. Your voice matters, and what you share with those whom you come into contact with can absolutely make a difference. So please use it to keep encouraging others to understand the power of DAP and the power of investing in early childhood education. Thank you.
Oh, wow. I thank you. Thank you so much for your wisdom, all three of you. It's been very powerful and really appreciate everything that you've shared with us. We've been doing Portraits of Courage this year. Very important conversation with dynamic visionaries and trailblazers in our field. Join us next month as we talk about systems building and what it takes to build systems, the courage it takes to build and sustain those systems. We're going to feature more recites and hope you join us next month. If you're in Massachusetts, we're always looking for additional people to help us serve families. And finally, I want to say, please join us in the conversation. Click the link. And thank you so much for learning with all of us at the CAYL Institute today. You're looking at a photo of our wonderful, amazing team. Thank you for your support of the CAYL Catalyst webinar series. We've reached 38 countries and every state in the nation, and look forward to joining with you again next month. Good evening.